The Amazon rainforest has swallowed thousands of people throughout history. Explorers, travelers, researchers, even entire tribes. But what happened to one man in his early 30s remains one of the most haunting disappearances modern investigators have ever seen. 5 years after he vanished, deep in a forgotten stretch of jungle where maps dissolve into nothing, a small search crew made a discovery they would never forget. A weather-worn backpack, and a human skull lying silently beside it. The items were arranged in a way that didn't make sense. There were no signs of animals, no signs of a struggle, and absolutely no trace of the man who carried that backpack into the forest alone. This is his story of Ethan. If you want to uncover the full mystery, make sure you hit that like, comment your thoughts below, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Ethan Ward was 33 years old when he walked into the Amazon. To most, he was just a quiet, adventurous traveler from Oregon who spent his savings hopping from one country to another. But to his family, Ethan was something else, a man haunted by questions he never stopped chasing answers for. From a young age, he had been drawn to places where few dared to tread. He devoured documentaries, old explorer journals, and maps that had begun to fade into obscurity. While his friends settled into stable lives, Ethan packed rucksacks and studied routes that led into wild, unmapped territories. His mother, Elaine, often described him as restless in the best possible way. "Ethan wasn't running away from life," she said once. "He was running toward something the rest of us couldn't see. It wasn't recklessness. It was curiosity, and a deep, almost spiritual need to touch corners of the world where humanity's footprint had barely left a mark." When he announced he wanted to explore a remote stretch of the Amazon, alone, the reactions were a mix of fear and disbelief. Friends warned him, his mother begged him, and even his younger brother, Lucas, pleaded for him to reconsider. "The Amazon doesn't forgive mistakes, Ethan," Lucas said. "I know," Ethan replied calmly. "But if I don't do this now, I never will." He had spent months preparing, meticulous packing, satellite communication devices, detailed maps, and survival gear. Yet even with all precautions, Ethan knew the Amazon was a force unto itself. It didn't follow maps. It didn't obey schedules. It didn't care about human ambition. And that was exactly why he had to go. Ethan's last confirmed sighting was on a humid morning in late June. He boarded a small riverboat transporting locals between two remote communities along the Rio Negro. The boatman, an elderly man named Marcos, remembered him vividly. Quiet man, carried a map that looked older than him, asked about places no one goes to anymore. After that, Ethan vanished into what locals called Silent Reach, a dense, foreboding region where radio signals died instantly, wildlife moved unpredictably, and even seasoned explorers refused to enter without backup. The region was steeped in local myths. Stories told of travelers who vanished without a trace, strange whispers in the night, and footprints that seemed to vanish into mud as if swallowed by the earth itself. Ethan didn't care about myths. He thought they were stories meant to scare the timid. But 3 days after entering Silent Reach, his scheduled satellite check-in didn't come. His family waited anxiously for 2 more days before contacting local authorities. By day 5, his GPS tracker stopped transmitting altogether. And a week later, the Amazon had claimed its newest name. The first search team, sent by local authorities, lasted only 48 hours. Dense undergrowth slowed them to a crawl. Tropical rains made the forest floor slippery and treacherous. Every footprint was quickly erased by mud and falling leaves. Even the sounds of the jungle seemed alive, whistles that could be mistaken for human calls, eyes glowing from trees that could be misinterpreted as movement. A second team employed drones to scan the canopy. Yet the jungle was unrelenting. The thick foliage rendered aerial searches nearly useless. By the third week, the official search was called off. But Ethan's family refused to give up. They funded private search teams, hired expert local trackers, and spent months chasing rumors, each as fleeting as the last. A shirt snagged in branches, a faint campsite, footprints vanishing into the mud, none of these clues led anywhere. For 5 long years, the forest kept it secret. 5 years passed. 5 birthdays with an empty chair at the dinner table. 5 Christmases with presents left unopened. 5 years of hope dissolving slowly into grief. Ethan's mother, Elaine, stopped traveling. She spent her days sifting through old letters and photos, clutching the hope that somehow, someway, he would return. His brother, Lucas, lit a lamp every night by his window, whispering into the dim light, "Just in case, Ethan, just in case." Meanwhile, Silent Reach remained untouched by outsiders. The forest didn't forgive time, it simply held it, pressing every secret deep into the roots and soil. Then, in the 5th year, something unexpected happened. A team of biodiversity researchers entered a rarely explored part of the rainforest to study newly discovered vines and fungi. They weren't looking for missing persons. Their focus was pure science, cataloging life that had never been photographed before. But one afternoon, under the heavy canopy where sunlight barely pierced through, they noticed an unnatural shape beneath a thick cluster of ferns. At first, they thought it was part of an animal skeleton. But as they pulled back leaves and mud, it became unmistakably human-made. A faded canvas backpack lay partially buried in soil, torn and soaked from years of rainfall, yet somehow remarkably intact. The researchers immediately called local authorities, who in turn contacted a forensic team. Helicopters carried investigators into the dense jungle, and soon, the scene was surrounded by specialists examining every inch of the area. When they carefully unzipped the backpack, they found items that immediately identified it as Ethan's. His field notebook, warped and soaked but legible. A metal water flask with the initials EW scratched into it. A compass with the needle frozen in place. A half-broken camera. And a rain jacket, torn and repaired with Ethan's own meticulous stitching. But just 2 feet away, partially buried in soil, lay a human skull. No spine, no rib cage, no limbs, only the skull, resting unnaturally on its side, as though someone had carefully placed it there. Normally, the Amazon's predators would scatter bones across wide areas, but this skull was untouched. Its presence beside the backpack didn't make sense. "This doesn't happen naturally," murmured one of the forensic investigators, his voice betraying disbelief. The forest was silent around them, as if holding its breath. Even the birds seemed to have fled. Forensic analysis confirmed what the team suspected. The skull belonged to a male in his early to mid-30s, perfectly matching Ethan's age. Yet the positioning of the remains was puzzling. Why only the skull? Why beside the backpack? And why had the rest of the skeleton vanished? Investigators proposed several theories. 1. Collapse and decay. Perhaps Ethan had collapsed beside his gear. But if that were true, the rest of his skeleton would be nearby. 2. Animal interference. Maybe predators had carried away the remains. Unlikely. The skull showed no bite marks, and there were no drag patterns. 3. Human interference. Could someone have moved the skull? A chilling thought, but there were no signs of another person being present. Lead pathologist Dr. Silva, an expert with decades of Amazon experience, shook his head. The skull shows no trauma, no fractures, no evidence of forced impact, just stillness. It was as though Ethan had lain down beside his belongings and simply vanished into the jungle's embrace. The investigation deepened. Soil samples were collected. Nearby trees were examined for markings. Even the air was studied for lingering signs of decomposition. But the forest offered nothing further. And the mystery only grew darker when investigators retrieved the damaged camera from the backpack. Investigators carefully salvaged the memory card from Ethan's damaged camera. Most images were corrupted beyond recognition, warped by water and humidity. But 7 images survived, leaving the team and Ethan's family shaken. 1. Ethan smiling on a sunlit riverbank, his backpack beside him. A sense of calm lingered on his face. 2. A blurry shot of dense jungle, trees so close together they seemed to crush the light. 3. A close-up of a strange marking on a tree trunk, scratched deep into the bark, almost like a warning. 4. A narrow trail leading into darker vegetation, the forest opening into shadows that swallowed the ground. 5. A nighttime photo, glowing eyes reflecting moonlight from some unseen creature, staring directly at the camera. 6. A photo of Ethan taken from behind, even though he was alone. His body was centered, but the perspective was impossible. 7. The final photo, a shot of the forest floor. Leaves, mud, roots, and nothing else. No foot, no shadow. Just emptiness. How had the camera taken a photo from behind Ethan if he was alone? Investigators had no answer. Some refused to speak about it. Others quietly suggested the possibility of a human observer, but no tracks, no evidence, and no footprints were ever found. The forest had absorbed Ethan's secrets and only offered fragments, cryptic and unsettling. Despite the skull and backpack, mysteries multiplied instead of resolving. Why was only the skull intact? Who or what had left it beside his backpack? What happened to the rest of his remains? And what took the impossible photo of Ethan from behind? Searchers found no other bones, no campsite, and no traces of human or animal disturbance beyond the immediate area. Investigators noticed strange phenomena around the site. Ferns arranged unnaturally in a circular pattern around the discovery. Silence where bird calls and insect sounds should have filled the air. Local trackers reported that the area felt wrong, the kind of quiet that made experienced hunters uneasy. Some suggested Ethan had simply lost his way, dehydrated, and collapsed. But veterans of the Amazon knew better. "People don't die that quietly out here," one tracker said. The backpack itself was positioned almost too neatly, as if someone had deliberately placed it beside the skull. The idea that Ethan had met another presence, human or otherwise, became impossible to ignore. Ethan's family, desperate for closure, insisted on visiting the site with officials. Elaine, his mother, stood silently before the backpack, her hands trembling. The same backpack she had helped him buy years ago now seemed to carry the weight of the entire forest's mystery. She did not cry. She did not scream. She whispered softly, "At least we have something now." Lucas knelt beside the skull, voice shaking. "I hope you weren't alone at the end. I hope someone was there." The Amazon, however, had already taken the rest of Ethan's story, leaving only fragments for the family to hold. Local guides refused to return. Animals avoided the area. Even the wind seemed to carry a hushed tone as if warning visitors to leave. For Elaine and Lucas, seeing the remains was both a comfort and a horror, the tangible proof of Ethan's existence, yet a reminder that the jungle would always guard its secrets. The official case concluded as death by exposure and environmental factors. Privately, however, investigators remained unconvinced. Questions lingered. How did his skull remain intact and untouched for 5 years? Who, if anyone, had placed it beside the backpack? Where were the rest of his bones? And who or what had captured the impossible final photo? The Amazon did not offer answers. Only fragments, only echoes, only shadows of what had occurred. Yet one thing was certain. For 5 long years, the forest kept Ethan's final moments hidden. And perhaps it always will. Ethan Ward went into the Amazon searching for meaning, and 5 years later, investigators found only a skull and a backpack, hinting at a story that defies explanation. Even today, locals avoid the discovery site. The forest remains as dense, unyielding, and mysterious as ever.